I pull the letter from my coat while they're still clapping for the man who burned me. The applause is rich and sticky like syrup on a table that no one bothered to clean. My fingers are already around the envelope, the seal sharp against the edge of my thumb. I don't look at him. Not yet. I look at the faces lighting up around him. Diane's got her hand to her heart like he just proposed a toast to peace. Melissa's smile is brittle glued on. Liam's got his phone half lowered recording the tail end of Alan's holiday redemption tour. Alan grins like he's made of light, basking in the attention like it belongs to him. His suit fits just right down to the cranberry red pocket square like he's rehearsed this in the mirror. To healing, he says. To letting go. To telling the truth even when it's hard. There's a smug softness in his voice, the kind that sounds generous until you listen too closely. Someone claps harder. Diane chimes in with, "That's the spirit." More laughter. The fire crackles in the corner. The tree glows in golds and whites, expensive, controlled like everything in this house. I feel the heat from the fire on my right side, but the other half of me is cold. The envelope isn't thick. It doesn't need to be. One page, one notarized line, one memory no one wanted to believe. I step forward. Alan sees me just as the applause dips. He doesn't move. I can see his tongue flick against the inside of his cheek just once. A micro-tell. He knows what this is, or at least he suspects. But he plays it. "Kara," he says, surprised like I've just returned from the dead. "Did you want to say something?" I hold the letter up not high just enough. He lowers his glass. Someone shifts near the couch. The clinking of a fork on china stops short. "It's just something I thought we could all read together," I say. His jaw tightens, but only slightly. A trained smile hangs from his lips like a painting hung crooked. "It's Christmas," he says, and that's exactly why I reply. I can feel Liam shifting position with the phone. His shoulder lifts, his arm following, angling the lens. The red light is steady. Recording. The room doesn't know what's coming, but it knows enough to go still. The first moment of silence is the loudest thing all night. The letter isn't magic. It won't scream. It won't accuse. It just shows something no one here expected to face, something that Alan months ago handed back to me in a manila envelope without opening. He thought that was the end of it. He thought wrong. I don't open it yet. I don't need to. Just holding it shifts the mood the way a knife still in its sheath can change the tone of a room. The children are in the den watching a movie. Thank God for that. I glance toward Diane. She gives me that warning mother look, the one that suggests she'll clean up any mess I make, but I won't like how she does it. I glance back at Alan. He takes a sip of wine. Doesn't blink. The letter rests in my palm, warm now, like it belongs there. I say nothing else. The moment ends not with words but with the sound of someone coughing gently into their sleeve. The party resumes around me, but not really. People move, but the center of gravity has shifted. Alan turns to speak to someone else. But the damage is done. They saw the letter. They saw him see it. They saw the smile twitch and fail. Some truths don't set you free, they make you stay and face the room. I'm Kara Delaney, 33, a paralegal from Sacramento, California. That's the version I give people when they ask at weddings, airport lounges, or now I guess at family reunions masquerading as holiday miracles. I said yes to Diane's invitation 2 weeks ago against my better judgment. Her message was classic Delaney diplomacy: let's not drag old things into the holidays. What she meant was don't embarrass anyone, especially Alan. I replied with, I won't. Unless someone else does. It had felt like a warning, but really it was a promise. I stood in my kitchen when that message came through, reading it twice before sliding open the top drawer. There it was, the envelope. Not yellowed, not dusty, not hidden under flour bags. Just exactly where I left it, ready. The very thing Alan had given back to me last March after our mediation, thinking that returning it somehow erased its contents. He hadn't even read it. I watched him hand it over like he was doing me a favor. And now here I was in this house again, pretending the past hadn't rooted itself into every piece of tinsel Diane had lovingly taped to the banister. The plane ticket was non-refundable. The story was already unwinding. When I arrived in Sacramento that morning, it was raining. Not heavy, but that kind of lazy California drizzle that makes everyone act like it's a monsoon. My ride from the airport was quiet. Melissa picked me up, her hair damp, her voice soft. We didn't talk about Alan. Not directly. He's been back a lot, she said, watching traffic instead of me. Diane thinks the more dinners he comes to, the more we forget why he stopped showing up. I didn't answer. That night while the house was quiet, I took the envelope out and laid it flat on the bedspread. There was no drama to it, no music swell, just paper and ink and a name at the bottom that mattered more than it used to. I didn't open it. I didn't need to. What it said was already carved into me. The next day Diane texted again. Alan will probably say something during the toast, just nod. Please don't challenge him in front of everyone. I stared at that message, longer than the first. Noted, I replied. What I didn't say was that I had no intention of challenging him. Not yet. Instead, I folded the letter once more, slid it into the inside pocket of my coat and zipped the coat into my suitcase. The suitcase sat by the stairs untouched until Christmas morning. I woke early before the house stirred. Diane kept the thermostat too high and I could already hear the electric hum of something baking. Melissa was downstairs already making her famous mulled cider, the one with whole cloves and orange peel like our mother used to. We weren't sisters by blood, but close enough that it didn't matter. We'd played that role well better than the people who actually shared DNA. She handed me a mug. You okay? I nodded, inhaled the steam. You know what today is, she added. I know exactly what today is. Outside rain had turned to mist. The driveway glistened like glass. The house was quiet, too quiet for what was coming. Later I stood by the entryway mirror fixing my scarf. The same one Alan had given me 3 Christmases ago before everything cracked. I used to love that scarf. Now it just looked like part of the costume I was wearing to survive the day. As I looped it tighter, Diane passed behind me. You look lovely, she said, placing one hand lightly on my shoulder. Her voice was gentle but her eyes did not meet mine. I'll keep it simple, I said. Her hand stilled. Good, she said after a breath. Simple is best. She turned and disappeared toward the kitchen. I didn't move. I just stared at my reflection and waited for the lie to finish echoing through the hall. It wasn't about blame, just getting along. Alan arrived late as expected. I was already in the kitchen when I heard his voice, that same deep, easy baritone that used to melt rooms and reset blame with a smile. He walked in like nothing had ever happened, like this family wasn't stitched together with things we'd agreed never to say out loud. Look who finally made it, Diane called out from the living room, voice bright, polished. You'd never guess she was a woman who'd sent 2 carefully phrased texts in the last week trying to keep the peace by clamping my mouth shut. He walked into the kitchen like he owned it. His coat still damp, his grin sharp. I froze at the cutting board, knife mid-slice through a Honeycrisp. Melissa caught my glance and nudged the tray of cider closer like a peace offering. Hey Kara, he said, dropping his keys on the granite with a clink. Alan. He leaned in for a hug, arms wide, way too wide. I gave him a stiff shoulder and turned away mid-embrace. He held it for a second longer than anyone should. How's life in the trenches? Still burying people in paperwork. Still charming. Still condescending. Still keeping men like you out of court, I answered. The words came too easily. He laughed like I told a joke, but his eyes didn't match the sound. I saw the twitch in his cheek, the barely visible clench of his jaw. Tells I'd catalogued from the final year of our marriage. Melissa offered him a mug of cider before he could say something worse. Want the cinnamon stick or plain, dealer's choice, he said, flashing her a smile that used to belong to me. I didn't wait for the next beat. I slipped out of the kitchen and into the hallway, coat still on, envelope still tucked inside the inner lining. My hand brushed it and for a second I thought about pulling it out, right then shoving it into Diane's palm while she arranged napkins, watching the weight of it flatten her holiday decor like truth always does. But I didn't. Not yet. Alan followed. His footsteps slow, careful. I turned at the corner where the hall narrowed, met his eyes just as he said my name again, lower this time. Kara. Seriously, let's not make this a thing. My mouth curled but not into a smile. That depends who starts. His face was still. It always amazed me how still someone could become when they knew something dangerous sat just beneath your calm. I came here to fix things, he said. Let's just get through today. I leaned in slightly. Then don't start rewriting the past just to make your story sweeter. Alan blinked. You holding on to that piece of paper won't save you. It's not about saving, I whispered. It's about proving who broke what. He stood there a second longer, then stepped back, the polished mask sliding back over his face. He turned and walked away, adjusting his cufflinks like nothing had been said. I stayed in the hallway another minute. The Christmas lights from the living room flickered across the carpet, casting everything in that strange gold and red shadow that always made this house feel more staged than lived in. Back in the kitchen, Melissa had her sleeves rolled up, scooping mashed sweet potatoes into a dish. You okay? I nodded even though the tension in my neck was screaming. She offered a half smile. You didn't bring it. Did you? I didn't answer right away. I watched the steam rise off the food slow unfurling. Then, it's in my coat. She looked down, gave a tiny nod. Then, I'll make sure the camera's charged. For a second, I forgot to breathe. Alan had no idea the kind of silence he'd walked into this time. Not rage. Not vengeance. Preparation. Alan corners me in the hallway and tells me not to ruin the mood. I tell him that depends who starts. He doesn't know the mood already cracked the minute I walked in with the truth. By late afternoon the house was full. Diane moved through the rooms like a general in heels, placing people where they'd sparkle under the string lights or stay far from each other if past slights hadn't been properly buried. Alan was in his element, grinning wide, his voice rising just enough to lead without dominating. Every gesture was curated. Every laugh landed with a calculated thud. You could almost believe he'd never drawn a bloodline across this family just 9 months ago. I kept my coat on. It wasn't cold, but the weight of it helped. The envelope inside pressed flat against my ribs. I could feel it every time I turned too quickly. I didn't want it in my bag. Didn't want it in a drawer. I wanted it near me under layers where it couldn't be stolen or softened. Melissa stuck close, offering me cups of cider I didn't touch and short nods that meant hold. Liam had set up the camera in the far corner of the living room. Family footage, he'd said with a wink, pretending to aim it at the tree but subtly angling it so the seating area and firelight fell squarely in frame. No one questioned him. He always filmed. Birthdays, graduation dinners, even Diane's garden party 2 summers ago. They were used to the blinking red light. They just didn't know what he was actually capturing this time. I heard Alan laughing with someone near the fire. You should have seen me trying to cook that turkey last year, disaster. Someone chuckled. Another guest chimed in about cranberry sauce. I watched him run the room like a salesman doing crowd work. His voice was magnetic. Even now. Especially now. Then came the digs. Harmless at first. He made a crack about Melissa's vegetarian phase in college. About Liam's failed crypto startup. Then his eyes landed on me and I felt the weight shift. Kara used to make the world's driest stuffing. I mean, chew with water dry. The room laughed, soft, unsure. We nearly sued her for emotional damage. Diane coughed politely. Alan, all in good fun, he said, hands raised. It's all in the past. We're all trying to rebuild, right? My jaw tightened. He kept going. You know, I think what matters most is honesty. Being upfront. You lie to yourself long enough and it becomes muscle memory. That's what breaks families. His gaze landed directly on me now, even though he smiled at the group. I smiled back, still seated, still silent. He clinked his glass against someone else's. To healing. And to people brave enough to admit when they were wrong. Melissa leaned in, whispering. He's trying to bait you. I know. Is it working? I didn't answer. I just unbuttoned the top of my coat. Diane approached with a tray of deviled eggs, her smile stretching like an overworked bridge. Let's save the speeches for dessert, huh, she said, placing the tray down a little too hard. One of the eggs rolled slightly. Alan nodded. Of course. Just saying what needed saying. He moved to refill his wine. I saw the label, a Pinot he'd bragged about last year. A $40 bottle dressed up like a $200 one. Liam adjusted the camera, subtly zooming. Melissa stood. Actually, before dessert, Alan, maybe say a few words, since you brought everyone together. Alan paused, flattered. The room stilled. He raised his glass again. All right. All right. I stood as well. He faltered slightly but recovered. To new beginnings and clearing the air, he looked at me again, the challenge now overt. To learning from the past, even if some people still pretend nothing happened. The firelight flickered behind him. The shadows made his smile look more like teeth. I took 2 slow steps forward. He didn't move, but I saw it, the small shift in his weight. His smile flickered. Diane's hand froze around a glass stem. I'd like to say something too, I said calmly. Everyone turned. Liam's camera light was still blinking red. I reached into my coat. Alan lifts a glass to clearing the air and I reach into the coat he thought I'd take off. The room is still because they sense what's coming even if they don't yet know the shape of it. Alan stood tall, the fire casting a flattering glow on his suit jacket as he raised his glass again. To new beginnings, he repeated, his voice smooth, theatrical. And clearing the air. I saw the flicker in Diane's eyes, her half-second glance at me, a silent plea not to respond. Melissa's lips were pressed into a line, her fingers tight around her mug. Liam adjusted his camera in the corner. The blinking red light stayed steady. Recording. Quiet. Unforgiving. To honesty, Alan added, pausing long enough to let the words stretch thin. Even if it's hard. Especially when it's hard. I stepped fully into the glow of the living room. He froze. I heard the sound of a spoon clinking softly against a dish in the dining room, someone else laughing uncertainly, and then the silence started to spread slowly, organically, as if every guest suddenly sensed they were about to witness something they hadn't agreed to. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. Alan, I said, calm and level. Would you like to tell them what happened last March? The room stilled. He turned slowly, eyebrows raised. I'm not sure what you mean. I pulled the envelope from inside my coat. The sound of the paper sliding out was quieter than the hush in the room, but somehow louder too. You handed this back to me, remember, I said. Unopened. Like it didn't matter. Alan didn't move. I think tonight is as good a time as any to let everyone else decide if it matters. Diane stepped forward. Kara, please. This is Christmas. That's exactly why, I replied. Truth shouldn't have a season. Liam's camera light blinked, unwavering. Melissa didn't speak, but I felt her shift closer, like a fault line bracing before it splits. Alan tried to laugh. This feels a bit dramatic, doesn't it? I mean, we've moved past all that, haven't we? He glanced around for allies. A few guests looked away, uncomfortable. One woman sipped her wine with a bit too much urgency. Diane looked as if she wanted to stop time by sheer will. I unfolded the letter. The page was crisp, no wrinkles, a clean, silent betrayal in serif font. You signed this on November 6th, I said. File ref #height 7443CA. Notarized. Witnessed. A legal statement acknowledging that I held sole custody, full waiver of further claim. And yet I paused, letting the weight hit. You told everyone I walked out. You told them I kept things from you. Lied? I don't know what that's supposed to prove. It proves, I said louder now, that you lied. Not just to me. To them. I looked around the room. To every single person in this room. The silence was thick now. Almost viscous. Melissa stepped forward, her voice low but clear. I remember the day you gave that envelope back. You told me Kara was being spiteful. You said there was no agreement. Alan turned toward her. Melissa, this isn't. She shook her head. Don't. I wanted to believe you. I did. But I recorded that conversation for my own peace. Because I knew something was off. The murmurs rose now, the room no longer frozen but restless. Melissa pulled out her phone. I have the audio and a screenshot of the text you sent Diane last night. Diane gasped audibly. Melissa, it's from your phone, Alan. Make sure Kara doesn't open her mouth. Sent at 9:32 p.m. iPhone 13 Pro. Device ID ending in 4J7. Alan stepped back. This is insane. I said nothing. I didn't need to. Liam kept the camera steady. No one told him to stop. Do you know what I hate most? I asked softly now. Not what you did. But how sure you were that I'd stay quiet. That I'd stay in the room, take the photo, drink the cider, and let you reinvent the past. Alan looked to Diane for help. She didn't speak. The letter still trembled slightly in my hand, but I didn't try to hide it. Let them see it. Let them see me. Alan dropped his glass onto the nearby side table, the sound brittle and final. I won't be part of this circus, he muttered and turned. He stormed toward the hallway, his footsteps hard against the wooden floor. No one followed. Liam's camera blinked. No one clapped. Liam's camera keeps rolling as Alan storms out and no one follows. The silence he leaves behind is louder than his speech ever was. I didn't sit down after Alan left. The letter was still in my hand, open now, its single sheet absorbing the heat from my skin like it had been waiting for this. No one said anything. Not Diane, not the cousins pretending to stir their drinks. Even the fire in the hearth had quieted to a flickering murmur, like the room itself had been stunned into submission. I looked at Liam. He kept the camera steady. Then I looked at Diane. She stood rigid, one hand on the back of a dining chair. The polished hostess was still in there somewhere, but her foundation was cracking. Not the makeup, the performance. I'm sorry it came to this, I said, voice low, but I won't apologize for proving it. Diane's lips parted like she might speak, but nothing came out. I folded the letter slowly, deliberately, like sealing a box I'd kept open far too long. You gave this back to me, Alan, I had said just minutes earlier. You thought I shredded it. That line still hovered in the air, the ghost of my voice thick in the living room. What I didn't say, not out loud, was that he wasn't the only one who hoped I would. There was a time not so long ago when I thought about doing just that. Shredding it. Letting it die quietly in a recycling bin, trading a little peace for silence. But silence is never neutral. It's a stage. It lets the loudest liar win. And I wasn't letting him win. The guests had begun whispering. No one had left, but no one seemed eager to stay either. Wine glasses hovered. Phone screens lit up and dimmed. The social gravity had broken. Melissa stood beside me now, not touching but close. "That was the version they thought you destroyed," she murmured. I nodded once. The copy I saved wasn't the version they counted on. That was the line echoing in my head. Motive made flesh. Truth not rewritten but recovered. She glanced around, then leaned in. "You ready for the rest?" I looked at her. "Text logs?" I asked. "More than that." She pulled her phone from her pocket, fingers scrolling. "Last night after dinner, Alan came to talk to me. Said I should keep you distracted. And that if you got weird to call Diane." I kept my face still. I knew he was up to something, so I left the camera rolling on my phone. Voice memo. Clean audio. And this. She held up a screenshot. I recognized the iMessage layout immediately, timestamped 9:32 p.m., from Alan D. To Mom, the preview line chilling in its simplicity: "Make sure Kara doesn't open her mouth tomorrow. Say whatever you have to." The photo was clear. Timestamp crisp. Below the message was the gray, "Read 9:33 p.m. Melissa whispered, "I can airdrop it to Liam now if you want him to patch it into the full footage." I stared at her phone for a moment longer, then nodded. "Do it." She turned, walked over to Liam, and handed him the phone without a word. Across the room, Diane finally found her voice. "I don't think you understand what you've done," she said, soft but sharp. "I do," I replied. "I understand exactly." She stepped forward, the gold charms on her bracelet clinking like wind chimes in a storm. "That letter was never supposed to be used against him. It was a private agreement. A moment of stress. It wasn't meant for this. It was notarized. It was legal. It was real," I said. "And it was never supposed to be buried just because it made him look bad." Diane's expression flickered. "You're hurting your family." "No," I said. "He did that." A pause. Then I reached into my coat again and pulled out the scarf, the faded one, the gray and burgundy knit Alan gave me 3 years ago, before the mediation, before the text messages, before he weaponized the story of our breakup and told it like I disappeared out of spite. I held it in my hand for a moment, then draped it gently across the back of the couch. "He gave me this the same night he told our daughter I was moving out because I didn't love them anymore," I said. She cried into this scarf while I packed. Diane's hand shook slightly. "I didn't come here to win," I said. "I came to stop losing." Liam nodded from behind the camera. "That's our closer," he said, voice low but steady. I turned toward him. "Not yet." He blinked but said nothing. I turned to the room, the full circle of relatives and onlookers, some still too stunned to speak, others processing the ripple of every word just dropped in front of them. "I'm not asking for sympathy," I said. "I'm asking for memory." Melissa looked at me. "And justice, that too." We stood there in the middle of the living room, the letter back in its envelope, the scarf folded like a flag of something once warm but now irrevocably changed. There were no more toasts. There was no more applause. Just the truth standing upright. I came to stop losing. Now they know I brought the one version of the story they can't erase. Diane stood very still. For a woman who spent her life making chaos look like choreography, crisp table settings, manicured greetings, warm threats disguised as hospitality, stillness was unnatural. But that's what grief does to someone who's spent years managing perception instead of facing reality. The scarf lay across the back of the couch like a folded verdict, soft but heavy. "You're misremembering," she said quietly. That was her first line of defense. "Revision." "I'm not," I replied, just as quiet. "But you can keep trying if it helps you sleep." Diane blinked slowly. "You know Alan wasn't well then. The stress, the custody, the job. You didn't see how it broke him. He wasn't thinking clearly." "Is that your defense for what he told Lily?" My voice didn't rise. I didn't need volume to cut. "That her mother stopped loving her. He didn't mean it like that. You weren't there. You didn't hear him." "She did." Melissa moved slightly beside me but didn't speak. This was a storm we'd both expected and one I had to walk through alone. Diane inhaled through her nose. You've always been good with words, Kara. But words can destroy things too. We were trying to hold this family together. No, I said. You were holding Alan together. The family just came along for the bruises. That stung. I saw it. But still she held her pose, that tight-lipped matriarch poise that came with decades of inherited silence. It was the kind of posture women wore in kitchens and courtrooms, one that said we don't cry in front of guests and we certainly don't confront men when they're trying their best. You could have handled this differently, she said. I did. For a year. That hung there thick in the air. From the far end of the room, a cousin stood and quietly excused herself to the kitchen. Another guest followed. The living room was thinning, but the center held me, Diane, Melissa, and the letter still resting on the coffee table like a waiting gun. People make mistakes, Kara. Even you. I didn't forge a signature. I didn't lie about custody. I didn't build a narrative that made me a villain so he could stay a victim. He was under pressure. Then maybe he should have handled that pressure like an adult. Diane's voice cracked just once. You have no idea what he went through after you left. No, I said. And you never asked what I went through before I left. That landed like a slap because it was true and we both knew it. In the silence, I watched her eyes fall to the letter again. She didn't pick it up, didn't touch it. It wasn't hers to hold anymore. Behind me, I heard the faint tap of Liam's fingers against his phone, probably organizing the footage into folders, timestamping it, preserving it. Diane turned her back to me, walked toward the hearth and stopped. Her voice when it came was strange. Thin. You think this will fix something, but it won't. It'll just leave new cracks. I'm not here to fix. I'm here to finish. That made her flinch. She turned back to face me, her face older than I remembered it being just yesterday. You used to call me Mom, she said. I used to think you earned it. It wasn't meant to be cruel. But it was honest. She walked past me toward the dining room, paused near the doorway, and without turning said, You should go upstairs. The guest room's made. You shouldn't drive right now. I almost laughed. Even now she'd just had the foundation of her story demolished and she still wanted me to have a proper night's sleep. I'm not staying, I said. She nodded once like she knew that was coming. Then she left the room. Melissa stood beside me for a long time without speaking. Finally, she broke the silence. You good? No, I said. But I'm finished. She exhaled. Okay. I looked around the room, the cold plates, the untouched gifts, the blinking tree, the camera now silent and still. This was a different kind of cleanup. I don't need to win, I told her. You already did, she said. No. I just stopped losing. The scarf still sat on the couch. I folded it gently, the way I might fold a letter I was never going to read again, and tucked it into my bag. Are you ready for what comes next? She asked. No. But I am ready to stop pretending it never came. We walked out together. The front door opened with a creak. The night was colder now. Clear. The kind of air that doesn't let you lie even to yourself. As we stepped onto the porch, I glanced back once at the still-lit living room. I thought about what Diane said. About how words could destroy. And I knew she was right. But silence had done far worse. She tells me people make mistakes. I tell her silence makes cowards. Behind me the house stays lit, but everything inside has gone quiet. I didn't sleep that night. Not really. Melissa offered her couch and I accepted, but the cushions felt unfamiliar, like I'd been placed in someone else's dream. I lay there under a borrowed quilt, staring at the ceiling fan turning slowly above me, listening to the house breathe and settle. Even with Alan gone, his echo lingered. His presence didn't need a body, it had lived too long in people's excuses to die just because he walked out. My phone lit up just after midnight. A message from Melissa, I have the rest. Sending now. A second later, a shared album appeared, Delaney, 1224. Evidence. I opened it. Inside the screenshot, a voice memo labeled hallway, 9:31 p.m. and 4 photos showing Alan holding Diane's phone typing something timestamped to match the text Melissa had shown earlier. She must have been standing just out of frame. The gallery was an autopsy of trust. I didn't respond right away. I just stared at the images until the screen dimmed. Then I pressed play on the voice memo. Alan's voice filled the quiet. Just keep her out of it. She won't push if you act like it's not a big deal. Say something about Lily, make her feel guilty. She always falls for that. Then Diane's voice. She's not the same girl anymore. Alan, she doesn't have to be. Just keep her quiet one more night. The clip ended. It was short, damning, and unmistakably real. The next morning I woke to the sound of Melissa setting the kettle on the stove. Sunlight stretched across her kitchen like it hadn't witnessed anything cruel. I walked in barefoot, still holding my phone. I listened, I said. She turned. I know. I held it up. I think I'm done. Melissa nodded. What now? I send it. She raised an eyebrow. To who? I hesitated. To Diane. And then, maybe a lawyer. Melissa stirred sugar into her mug. Ready to make it official? I'm not sure anyone's ready. But it's time. I opened a new message to Diane. I attached the voice memo and the screenshot. I kept the text simple. You've asked me to stay silent for a year. I won't anymore. This is why. I hit send. The read receipt appeared 30 seconds later. No response. I placed my phone face down on the counter and finally sipped the tea Melissa handed me. It burned a little, but the good kind. The cleansing kind. By noon I had an email from my attorney's office confirming the evidence had been received and appended to the custody file. The letter Alan signed, notarized, filed, ignored was now visible again. Not a buried agreement but an active one. Nothing retroactive, the assistant wrote, but enough for leverage. It wasn't victory. But it was a shift. That evening Melissa and I returned to the house not for reconciliation but for cleanup. Someone had to gather the presents, return the pie tins, retrieve what was left of the truth. Diane didn't speak to me. She stood in the doorway, arms crossed, lips pale. But she didn't stop me either. That was its own kind of surrender. Liam had already packed up the camera, his laptop open on the dining table, footage, loaded, edits, queued. You want the raw copy or the polished one? He asked. Raw, I said. They can edit their memories all they want, I won't. He handed me the drive. Melissa appeared behind him with a sealed envelope. I printed the screenshot. Backed it up to cloud and USB. I looked at her. Why? In case they try to pretend again. I nodded. As we turned to leave, Diane called my name. I turned. She didn't look angry anymore. Just tired. I hope you find peace in all this, she said. I will, I answered. But not from pretending. She didn't reply. Just nodded slowly and disappeared down the hall. Outside the sky was clean. No clouds. No storm. Just stillness. I opened my bag and looked down at the scarf. The one Alan had given me before the lies started. I pulled it out and handed it to Melissa. You sure? I nodded. It's not mine anymore. She folded it and placed it inside her trunk without a word. We drove away. Melissa shares the text and audio Alan thought would stay buried. Now I hold the kind of proof they can't explain away, and they don't even try. Alan's voice stayed with me long after the drive home. Not the sound of it that had always been tolerable, even pleasant in front of strangers, but the specific cadence he used in that audio file, like confidence was a birthright and manipulation just another dialect. I played it again the next morning. Just once. Just to remind myself I hadn't made it worse than it was. It was worse than I remembered. I sat at my kitchen table, sunlight pouring through the windows, the letter back in its envelope, the voice memo downloaded onto 2 separate drives. The screenshot was already forwarded to my attorney and Liam had backed everything up to cloud and hard copy. Still I kept staring at it on my phone, that gray message from Alan reading, make sure Kara doesn't open her mouth tomorrow. Say whatever you have to. There was no metaphor left. No veiled insult or implication. It was intent. I thought about not telling Lily. I thought about shielding her from this last ugly layer. But she wasn't a child anymore. When she came back from her dad's house that Sunday night, I made hot cocoa the way she liked, extra marshmallows, pinch of cinnamon, and sat her down on the couch. I need to tell you something, I said. She didn't flinch. That was the thing about kids raised between polite warfare and broken agreements. They stopped bracing because they always expected the next thing. It's about Dad, I said. And what he said. And what I proved. Her eyes narrowed slightly. But she didn't interrupt. I told her everything. Carefully. Factually. I showed her the letter. I read it aloud. I let her read it again by herself. I played her the voice memo, watched her face harden. Then she asked the question I'd been dreading. Why did he lie? I didn't have an answer clean enough to protect her. So I told the truth. Because some people think being right is more important than being decent. She nodded. She didn't cry. She didn't hug me. She just sat with it, with all of it, like she already knew this was who he really was and she'd just been waiting for someone to stop pretending otherwise. Later that night she came into my room, left her old stuffed penguin on my pillow and said, I want to stay here full time. I nodded. The next day I received a call from Diane. I didn't answer. She texted instead, "If you give this to the courts, it could destroy him." I stared at the screen for a long time. Then I typed, "He's already destroyed. This is just the record." No reply. Later that afternoon, my lawyer emailed a formal acknowledgement of the submitted materials. The email included scanned copies of the notarized letter and confirmation of digital authenticity, file ID 87443 CA, notarized on November 6. Signed by Alan Delaney. Waiver of custody claims full. Attached beneath that was Melissa's screenshot, fully fielded metadata, and the audio transcript with time and speaker labels. The subject line read, "Custody file updated, leverage confirmed." I didn't print it. I didn't need to frame it. But I saved it in 3 places. Alan tried texting me that night. No apology. No explanation. Just one line. "You always knew how to make me the bad guy." I didn't respond. Not because I didn't have anything to say, but because everything I'd needed to say had already been documented, sealed, recorded, shared. Let the silence answer him now. Let the evidence speak. Alan insists the message was a joke. I ask, so were the threats before or after the toast? And for the first time, Diane doesn't defend him. The text from Alan didn't come as a surprise. What surprised me was how little it stirred in me. A year ago I would have paced the room, rewriting my response in my head a dozen times, crafting a reply that balanced fury with grace. Now I simply archived it. That wasn't peace, that was proof of closure. 2 days later the footage was ready. Liam texted me a Dropbox link and a simple note, uncut, time-stamped, full audio. Clip starts 4:03 p.m. ends 5:16 p.m. Final frame is him leaving. I clicked the link and let the video load. It opened with Diane arranging wine glasses, Alan pacing behind her, rehearsing a line about truth and forgiveness. You could hear Melissa off-screen muttering, "Oh God, don't start early." Then the toast. The camera caught every second: Alan's dramatic pause, his quip about my stuffing, the practiced warmth in his voice when he said, "We're all trying to rebuild, right?" And then the moment he saw me stand up, it captured my hand reaching into my coat. The stillness that followed. My voice low but firm. His silence. Diane's attempt at interruption. The letter. Every expression in that room went from holiday glow to frozen war. Frame by frame you could watch belief collapse. The timing was perfect. Not edited. Just true. Then Melissa's voice. The screenshots. The quiet rage. The recorded audio. And finally Alan walking out, shoulders high but back bowed. The theater of retreat. I watched it all without flinching. When the video ended, I downloaded it to my desktop, backed it up to my drive, and sent a copy to my lawyer with the subject line, "Visual evidence, custody hearing prep." He replied within the hour. "This changes things." I stood at the kitchen window for a while after that, watching Lily in the backyard tossing a tennis ball against the fence with rhythmic focus. I could hear her humming a song, something from school, upbeat and steady. She didn't know I was watching. She looked unburdened. Not happy exactly, but lighter. A week passed. Then 2. And, on the 3rd Monday of January, Alan sent another message, "Can we talk?" This time I responded. "Talk to my attorney. You've seen the documentation." His reply came fast. "You're really doing this?" I already did. I didn't hear from him again after that. What came next wasn't dramatic. No slamming doors, no final showdown. Just paperwork. Dates. Witness confirmations. Statements from Melissa and Liam submitted in writing. The voice memo admitted into record. The letter, the one I'd carried in my coat like a buried blade, was finally used for what it was, the thing that cut through the fiction. Diane sent one last email before the hearing. It wasn't angry. Just brief. "I won't testify. But I also won't oppose. That's the best I can do." I didn't thank her. She had watched Alan lie for months. Had let him rewrite our story until it fit the shape of his ego. Silence may not have held the pen, but it bound the pages. The day before court, Lily asked if she had to come. I said no. She asked if he'd try to get her back. I said not, if he wanted to keep his license. She didn't ask what I meant. She just nodded and returned to her sketchbook. That night I laid out the documents on my kitchen table: the notarized letter, the screenshot printout, the transcript of the voice memo, Liam's footage, my affidavit, Melissa's statement. A full record. Undeaded. The silence of the house was no longer heavy. It was earned. The video ends with Alan walking out, but it's the faces left behind that tell the story. And now I'm not the one who has to prove what happened. He is. Family court didn't look like TV. There were no booming gavels or dramatic objections. Just folding chairs, tired carpeting, and the low murmur of overworked attorneys explaining things to exhausted parents. The clerk was younger than I expected. The judge older. The fluorescent lights above me buzzed faintly like they were trying to stay awake too. Alan sat across from me in a blue blazer he probably thought made him look harmless. It didn't. It made him look like a man who still believed optics mattered more than behavior. He didn't look at me. His lawyer did. Across the aisle, my attorney slid the stack of evidence forward. No grand gestures. Just a file folder with every piece labeled, scanned, and indexed. Exhibit A, notarized letter. Ref #height 7443 CA. Exhibit B, screenshot text to Diane. Deck 2493 2 p.m. Exhibit C, audio recording. Deck 2493 1 p.m. Exhibit D, video footage. Full holiday toast, unedited, timestamped. Exhibit E, witness statements. Melissa Daniels, Liam Reynolds. Exhibit F, custody log and prior agreements. The judge looked at the documents silently, then asked a single question: Has Mr. Delaney seen these in advance? Alan's lawyer nodded stiffly. The judge skimmed the audio transcript. His eyes stopped at the line, "Just keep her out of it. Say something about Lily. She always falls for that." He looked up. Mr. Delaney shifted in his seat. My attorney spoke. "Your Honor, this isn't about vengeance. It's about the sanctity of signed agreements and the ongoing emotional manipulation of a minor." The judge nodded. "Understood." Alan finally spoke. "Your Honor, there was no intention to mislead." The judge raised a hand. "Mr. Delaney, I've read the file. You handed your ex-wife a signed waiver and then spent months discrediting her to family and potentially to your child. This recording doesn't leave much ambiguity." Alan sat back. The next few minutes passed in procedural rhythm. Adjustments to the existing custody order. Confirmation that the waiver would remain in full effect. A court record that now included all 6 exhibits. Then the judge looked at me. "Miss Delaney, do you wish to file any request for court-mandated restrictions?" I shook my head. "No. I just wanted it on the record." He nodded. "Very well. The court finds no cause to reopen custody. The record reflects that all rights remain with Miss Delaney. Mr. Delaney's waiver stands as signed and filed. Case concluded." One tap of the gavel. No thunder. Just closure. Alan didn't move. Outside the courthouse, I exhaled for the first time in hours. Melissa waited by the sidewalk holding a paper coffee cup and a manila folder. I nodded once. She smiled faintly. It's done. We walked to my car in silence. No celebration. Just the gentle click of heels on pavement and the sound of my keys unlocking the door. I opened the passenger door, reached into the glove box, and pulled out the USB drive. Liam's footage. The full cut. I held it in my palm. Melissa raised an eyebrow. "Going to leak it?" I shook my head. "No. But it exists. And that's enough." She nodded, understanding instantly. Truth doesn't have to be viral. It just has to survive. When I got home, Lily was drawing at the kitchen table. I kissed the top of her head. "Everything okay?" she asked. "Better than okay," I said. "Everything is exactly where it should be." She smiled and returned to her sketch. In the quiet that followed, I looked at the now faded envelope sitting on the corner of my desk, creased, worn but still intact. I didn't throw it away. Some truths you don't bury. You just stop carrying them everywhere. The judge asks if I want to request restrictions. I say no. Because the record speaks louder than he ever could again. I mailed the original letter back to myself, a strange ritual maybe. But part of me wanted the finality, a dated postmark, an envelope that bore witness. Proof that the past no longer lived in a drawer but had been processed, stamped, and returned as history. It arrived 3 days later. I didn't open it. Just placed it in the small fireproof box where I kept Lily's birth certificate and the deed to the condo. Let the paper sit beside the life it tried to rewrite. Spring came early that year. By March the sun felt less like a glare and more like a balm. Trees outside our window bloomed in soft defiance of the months behind us. Lily joined an art club. Melissa switched departments at her firm. Liam texted me every so often to ask if I wanted a compressed version of the footage for archive. I always replied, "Keep the raw." Because some truths don't need editing, they just need to exist. Diane didn't speak to me for a while. Not after the court date. Not after Lily chose to stay full-time. Not even after Melissa sent back her pie dish with a sticky note that read truth still tastes better than tradition. But one Sunday morning in April I found a small envelope in my mailbox. No return address. Familiar cursive. Inside was a single note. I found the strength too late. But thank you for not waiting. Diane. There was no apology. But I didn't need one. She had stayed silent for too long, yes, but in the end she didn't stop the truth from speaking. And that mattered. That at least would make it into the version of this story I someday tell Lily when she asks why things turned out the way they did. Because she will ask. Because she deserves the real answer. One Sunday evening Lily and I sat on the floor folding laundry, a movie playing in the background, forgotten socks scattered like punctuation marks in an unfinished sentence. She looked up at me mid-fold. Do you think he ever loved us? The question came without venom. Just curiosity. I paused. I think he loved the version of us that didn't make him feel small. She thought about that. Is that wrong? No, I said. It's just not enough. She nodded. No tears. No dramatic piano music playing behind her. Just understanding. Clean. Quiet. Later that night she asked if she could call him. I said yes. Because the truth isn't a wall. It's a door. Once it's open, what people do with it is up to them. She spoke to him for 6 minutes. I heard her voice stay steady even when she said, I know what happened, Dad. I didn't hear the rest. She came back to the couch afterward and sat beside me. I think I'm done with that part, she said. I nodded. Okay. We watched the rest of the movie in silence. At one point she leaned her head on my shoulder. I didn't cry. I just let the moment arrive and pass and stay with me. Because this wasn't about revenge. It was never about burning him down. It was about light. About putting things where they could finally be seen. She asks if she can call him. I say yes. Because the truth isn't a prison. It's the key to something better.